Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 in my RuneScape to Sims 4 build series. This video is sped up a little bit more than usual because this was a really huge build, and yeah, like it was like, when edited it was about 2.5 hours initially, so then I sped it up some more and it's still over an hour. I think it's like an hour and 13 minutes, the actual speed build part of it, so that's just too long really. I've seen like other people do these really large builds and they have it at like, their videos are like half an hour long, maybe 40 minutes. Sometimes they separate it into parts, but even then it's usually like an hour and a half for the whole thing, and some of them are bigger than this. So like, I don't know how they do that, but that's amazing. I think like they must edit it a bit, and there are parts of this, like I've taken to pausing the recording, my recording software when I'm thinking about stuff, so I don't end up thinking too much while I'm recording, and that has cut down the time a little from the first big YouTube like build I did for YouTube, which was my pool mansion one. That one took forever to do, and I filmed most of it. I also think this might have been a bit faster, so I am getting faster at building stuff lately because I've been doing that more, which is cool, but it's still really long. It's like over an hour, like it's sped up, and that's just no good. Like the ideal for a large build I think would be about 30 to 40 minutes, an hour tops, and that I think an hour is too much really. So yeah, I am looking into like, I'm definitely going to look into ways to try and speed up the process. I think I've said this before, but like yeah, it still needs to be faster, I think. I'm hoping that you can still see what's going on and figure out like the stuff I'm doing, because I want these videos to have like some degree of educational value about what I'm doing. Otherwise it's kind of pointless. But yeah, I mean, at least you can see, you can get a kind of vague idea of the process at least. And then like I'll have like, you know, the opening video. That's why I do the opening video as well really, because then at least you can sort of see it in a, like a less frantic way as well, if I have like a fly through or something at the beginning of the video. Yeah, because obviously with the pool build I also did another video where it was just like certain parts of the build and then I explained how I did certain parts of it, and I do think that's better in a way, so I might do more videos like that than that, but they do take a lot more editing, which is a bit of a pain, so I don't know if I want to do every build like that. But yeah, anyway, to talk about this build, I'm building White Knight's Castle, which is like the Falador Castle from RuneScape. Now, it's quite a large lot. I mean, it's quite a large build to do with the lots in The Sims 4. Initially, I actually wanted to include more stuff in the castle environment, but there really wasn't the space after I built the castle, because the castle itself is so big. I had a similar problem with the Alcarid one, to be honest. I wanted to include like the bank and a bunch of other stuff, although it would have taken a lot longer to do, I realise now. So I did have to like reduce it in size. But yeah, in the end there just isn't the space, because you only have like a 50 by 50 is the biggest lot, and that's the one I'm working on. I really missed like the 64 by 64 lots in The Sims 3, because yeah, the more space the better really for this kind of build. But I tried to make it as close to the original as possible, and I ended up like going into the game a lot to try and like look at stuff. I took screenshots as I went along so that I wasn't like constantly tabbing out of the game, but it was like still quite difficult, so it was easier to just go into the game and look at stuff. So there were a lot of pauses, and there might be some jumps in this where I like stop the recording and go back. I tried to make it like as fluid as possible so that you don't notice any big jumps, but there might be a few like smaller ones. But yeah, so it was fun to do, but by the end it was driving me insane a little, like the constant sort of focus and having to go in and out of the game. I've spent like more time looking at Falador Castle now, well, White Knight's Castle, than anyone probably ever has. I noticed a lot of interesting things actually about the build in the RuneScape game as well. Like some of the windows only work on one side. Like there are windows that you can see out of, but on the exterior you can't see the window because it's covered up, yet they have a view, which is quite interesting. And then there are other windows that are like they're magical windows, and then there are other windows in the game that are just like basically window frames with no hole in the wall because they're not working properly. And yeah, there's lots of little things I noticed while building this. But I think I like this more than the Alcarid one. The Alcarid one, I think, like I really had a shortage of stuff for that one, but it's easier to do a kind of European style build like this with the content that you have in the base game and everything. I did end up doing this because I knew it would be a little easier with the base game content. I initially wanted to do Draenor Manor and Draenor Village, which I will do eventually, but I realised that the Vampire Pack has so much stuff that I need, like cobwebs. Like with that pack, I could do it without it, but it would be so stripped back compared to like what I can do if I have the Vampire Pack. So I'm gonna wait, because I don't know for sure, but I know like some of these packs, particularly the spooky themed ones, tend to go on sale around Halloween. So I'll wait till then, and then hopefully they'll go on sale. I don't know that they will, but if they do, then I will think about getting one of the packs. The Vampire Pack and possibly the other spooky pack, but I think almost everything I need is in the Vampire Pack for like Draenor. So I'll wait till then, because I want to do like a bunch of spooky themed videos during October, because it's Halloween, and I also think that video would be better for then, because it's like one idea to do for like a Halloween themed video, because it's seasonal. Another thing I'd really like to do is recreate Port Sarim from RuneScape, because that would be really cool to do. And I think a lot of the stuff in the Get Together expansion pack sort of fits that, but I'm not sure. Definitely some of the wallpaper textures from that expansion pack kind of fit the theme of that area, so I might wait to do that one. And actually there might be some wallpaper textures in that pack that work for Draenor as well, I'm not sure. But yeah, because I just don't have most of the content, and I also don't, it's a very expensive game, it's like a £500 game for all of the packs, and I don't, because you know, I'm sort of like torn, because I do like building, and I've seen like all of the content, and some of it would be really useful for certain things. You know, I've seen like other people do stuff with them, and it's inspiring, but like it does add up if you get all of them. But yeah, I definitely think I'll buy the Vampire Pack though, because that one, it also seems to have like a lot of like some of the Sims that come with the pack are pretty cool too, and I've been wondering about for a while. So I think that one would be worth it for me. But yeah, and then there's some stuff packs that I want to invest in eventually, and those are cheaper, so that's, you know, a little bit easier. But yeah. So those beds, like, I'm hoping this video isn't too out of sync because I am watching this unrendered, so it might, yeah, I haven't like rendered the video yet, and sometimes the sped up version is a little bit out when I'm like watching along with it. So yeah, so I'm hoping it's not terribly out of sync, but I think like the beds were placed a while ago in the video, so it should be fine. Those beds I end up changing later. They're just like, I put them in there as a placeholder so I could get a feel for like how much room there is. At one point I moved them so they were closer together, and then ended up changing that because I playtested it as I went along this time, and I noticed that the Sims couldn't walk in between when they were too close together, so I had to move it again. Yeah, I used a swimming pool for like the outside because of course the castle has like a moat around it. I think it's called a moat. Has water around it in Falador, in Runescape. So I had to like recreate that part, and then later in the video I put down a bunch of rocks because obviously in the outside of the castle in the game there are a bunch of rocks, and the debug tools were really useful for that. There are so many, like, because in my first build, not first build, but the first time I made use of rocks to try and create that effect was in my mansion build that I uploaded for YouTube actually, and what I did obviously was just resize the buyable rocks from the build mode catalogue in the plant section, and there's so much more variety of like debug boulders and stuff, and you can resize them all and put them all over the place. Another thing I did was have the ground floor be basically just a fake floor that's not used, and that way all of the rocks can just clip through and I can place them however I want without having to worry about it clipping through into an area that the Sims are going to go into. So it's basically just offset, so to speak, like it's like an irrelevant part of the building. And another thing is it made it so the building was a little bit higher up, because of course in the game there's a little bridge that sort of is arched and like goes up into the castle, and you can't have arched bridges exactly in The Sims, not arched like the bridges in the game, but I just kind of ended up adding like a staircase to make it like slightly elevated, but of course it's flat because you can't have arched bridges. And yeah, there was a lot of parts, like for a long time I did all of the half walls were just completely flat at the top, but then later I went around and made them look more like the part of the castle where it's like, I don't know what it's called, but like yeah, I'm not going to be able to guess, but like they're kind of like different levels, the top of the walls, so I should really check. I'm so bad at like knowing the parts of buildings, but yeah, anyway, so some parts I ended up changing later on, but they were just sort of put there as placeholders while I was building. And there's so many flaws to this too, and you only have 4 to work with in The Sims, but luckily that did end up being enough because you can put stuff on the roof level, and of course there are some stuff on the roof level in the actual RuneScape castle, but I don't know why, but one of the ladders I had leading to the roof was invisible. Like, you can only see it from the level below. I have 2 ladders leading up to the roof and a staircase in different towers, and one of the ladders appears like it's fine. I think the stairs are okay too, but maybe they're not. But this one ladder is just basically invisible from the top, so it just looks like there's a hole, and I have no idea why. It's just weird how graphical stuff like that will happen sometimes. I also had like a problem with one of the walls at one point where the shadows were really messed up, so it was just like solid black. When I used to do 3D modelling and stuff, I had that problem using certain game engines with lighting and stuff. it would be messed up sometimes because of like problems with the faces, and it would create weird lighting issues, and that seemed to happen on that wall, so I ended up having to delete it and then replace it. But yeah, I had to like, there's a bunch of cannons in one area of the castle on, I think, the 3rd floor, and I had to get really creative doing that. I used like a couple of wheelbarrows to get the like effective wheels, because there are like little wheels on the bottom of the cannons, on the like, there's probably a technical term for this, but I don't know it, but yeah, like on the sort of thing underneath the cannon, which is like supposed to roll the cannon around, because obviously you can't lift cannons because they're too heavy. I used wheelbarrows for that, and then I just resized the like little, there's like a barrel that's like filled with alcohol, I suppose, in like the decorative section of buy mode. So I just resized those and used them as like fake cannons. It's not the same colour as the cannon, because the cannon is like black and metal, but it was a similar kind of barrel effect, and yeah, there was some in the like the bedroom, for the, I guess like guard barracks or something, the room with a bunch of beds. There's like a bunch of cupboards full of ingredients and boxes and scrolls and stuff in the game, and well, it's not full of ingredients in the game, but I added the ingredients in The Sims. As I went along, I started tweaking things slightly, because I just kind of wanted to experiment a bit, even though it wasn't in the RuneScape build. But I didn't go too far from it, because I did want it to be fairly accurate. But yeah, I recreated that using shelves and like debug wood stuff, instead of using any of the existing cupboards, because none of the stuff that was in those cupboards felt exactly right, and there were a bunch of stuff, like boxes and crates, that I had available, so I thought I'll just resize that stuff and move it onto the shelves and make the shelves myself, because the cupboards in the game were basically just like, they were basically just shelves with like a couple of wooden pieces of wood on either side of the shelves, so it was like quite easy to do that, and yeah, that was a particularly fun part of the build to do. And then I did download a bunch of like flaming torches, because there's nothing like that in The Sims, and there are a bunch in the castle, and for me that was a very important part of the personality of the castle, having that lighting effect. So I did add those in, and I'm going to like upload this onto the gallery later, and I will have 2 versions, one with custom content and one without. So the one without will just have like a bunch of generic ceiling lights, I think, the small one, so that it like lights the area but doesn't like take away from it too much. Because I don't want to add other lights, because in my opinion most of them don't look quite right. But there are some like candelabras and stuff that are from the game around, so I'll keep those, but then I'll just use like the basic ceiling light for the other areas. But then in the custom content version I'll have the torches. They are pretty big torches, and you can't resize them, because as with most objects in the actual game, in The Sims 4, you can't resize the animated like stuff like fire effects or the water on in fountains, so that makes resizing those kind of objects like basically impossible, unless you want flames and fountain water in weird places. But like, even though they're quite big, they still work pretty well, I think. So yeah, it was a very cool mod too, because I definitely think I'll end up using it in other builds, because I want to do like more stuff inspired by like other games and film series potentially, and like I think like they could be useful in a lot of stuff. Like if I do Skyrim inspired stuff in the future, that could be useful. I was on Twitter actually, and I heard a rumour about like the next game pack maybe being medieval themed, and obviously this is like a rumour, so it's probably not going to be true. In fact, I think one of the sim gurus posted a poll about farming, so it's just as likely that the next pack will be farming related, to be honest. But like nobody knows what the next pack will be. But like I read that and I was just like, oh my god. Like if it was true, that would be really awesome, because like, and it was supposed to be like, I guess the rumor was like it was medieval and kind of Nordic themed, I think, and that would be so cool, because then if there are a bunch of build mode objects that are like Nordic themed, then I could like try and recreate like something from Skyrim, which would be really awesome, because I kind of wanted to move in that direction. Like when I set up this channel, it was a few years ago, and then I didn't end up using it, but I was planning on eventually recording some like let's play videos of the Elder Scrolls games, and in particular Skyrim, because I was playing that a lot at the time, and I'm a big fan of the Elder Scrolls series. So my username is actually a reference to the Elder Scrolls. It has nothing to do with Sims, even though all my videos at the moment are Sims related, except the one that's sort of about Paralives, but that's still technically Sims related, since it also talks about The Sims 4. But yeah, like, yeah, it's a reference to, like, in that game there are a bunch of, I don't know why I'm talking about the Elder Scrolls series now, because this is a RuneScape video, but yeah, there are a bunch of, like, in Oblivion, there are calipers and tongs, two separate objects all over the world, and there's some kind of hilarious quest in the Shivering Isles expansion pack. I will probably, like, I've been thinking about making a video about this at some point, just because it's funny. Like, it's one of my favourite little Easter egg things, because it gets brought up in Skyrim. Like, there's an NPC I forget the name of, maybe in Riften, I can't remember what city they're in, but they're in one of the courts, in like one of the, like, yeah, it might be Riften, but anyway, they basically make a reference to the fact that, like, there are no calipers or tongs in any houses in Skyrim, but they used to be all over Tamriel. So yeah, that's just, I don't know, I found like that pretty funny, because like the quest in the Shivering Isles, I don't know if it's not really spoilers because it's not a major part of the story, but there's basically like an NPC that's like collecting calipers and tongs because he wants to make a ship. There's a lot of weird quirky people in the Shivering Isles expansion pack, because the idea is everyone there is mad because it's the mad gods. The lore in Elder Scrolls is actually really great. So yeah, but I didn't end up making any Let's Plays for that game, and I might in the future, but I actually do find it quite hard thinking of things to say while playing stuff. And I still don't feel like I've gotten to a point where I'm comfortable enough talking to the camera to like do that kind of content right now. I have been like talking a bit more in these build videos for like longer periods, but it's still kind of difficult, and so yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do that any point soon, but I might do one day. But like in the meantime, yeah, I would be quite interested in like recreating stuff from that. So if there was like a Nordic expansion, well, game pack or whatever for The Sims 4, that would be cool. I mean, I suppose it might be possible to do some stuff now, and I've seen like some of the stuff people do, like some people get really creative with it and manage to do all kinds of stuff using the debug options and such, so it could be possible, I don't know. But yeah, I think it would be a lot easier if there was like a pack that catered to that. So yeah, when building this castle, I found like a problem I came up against a lot was the grid system and just getting everything to sort of match up, because there was some stuff that I couldn't place in ways that I wanted to because of the grid, like the build tools, because obviously buy mode can be got around by just using move objects on, which I did use a lot in this, so that could potentially be a problem if downloading it. I definitely used the move objects on tool a lot. Stuff is placed in all kinds of weird places, but you can't do that with build mode stuff. It has to snap to the grid, and I came into that problem a lot. And there's also like this roof that goes along the edge of the castle, and it was really hard to do that, because in the end I have like, it doesn't look exactly how I'd want it to, because you can see the line of like, the roof isn't all joined together like it is in the RuneScape build. You can see the lines of where it's not joined, and maybe it looks okay-ish from a distance, but like when you're up close it's very obvious to see the gaps. in different parts. And yeah, that was difficult. And another thing is, like, when I was recreating it, I didn't make it exactly square for square, exactly like the Falador Castle, which I ran into some problems with later in certain rooms. Some rooms had a lot more negative space, and some rooms just didn't have enough room, and I had to tweak the sizes of certain things a few times as well. And other stuff I just, like, let it go, because recreating it exactly is definitely very difficult, but I think I did an okay job in the end. Like, it still has, like, it's recognizable if you know what White Knight's castle looks like. So that's, like, the main thing. And I'm lucky in, like, there's, like, that blue roof texture is really perfect. So that's cool. But, like, the bricks and other stuff, there was nothing exactly like in RuneScape. I get to the point where I'm, like, thinking about some of these builds and thinking, like, maybe I should just, like, mod certain things in, like, certain textures and whatnot. But then at a certain point it's like, why don't you just build, like, recreate it, like, a 3D model of it? Like, if you're, like, getting to that point, I don't know. Because part of the fun, I suppose, is, like, trying to recreate it as closely as possible while not using too much custom content or creating custom content. But I do have, like, a background in 3D modelling, so I also kind of compare stuff to that a bit, and, like, what I could do with different resources. But no, this is The Sims, so yeah, there are limitations. Another thing is, like, yeah, I used curtains for the banners outside the castle, and I ended up getting rid of them on one wall because there just wasn't enough space, because I hadn't planned it well enough compared to the original. And it just, like, in the end I was just like, no, they're not gonna fit, and I didn't want to squeeze them into the corner, because they were supposed to be a lot longer in the original anyway. So having these, like, small curtains and then also squeezed into the corner and then trying to fit all this other stuff around them, it just didn't work. I also had to make the curtains in the front. The curtains, well, they are curtains. I had to make the curtain banners in the front, like, a lot smaller than I wanted them to be, because for some weird reason there was this shadow problem with one of them. One of them fit perfectly, and the other wouldn't fit in exactly the right place without being solid black because of the shadow and lighting problems. And I couldn't figure out how to, like, resolve that problem with the curtain, unlike the wall where a similar thing happened. So in the end I gave up and just made them smaller because nothing was really working. But that was kind of annoying. I'm not sure how much some of these problems, I don't think the curtain thing is related, but I did notice, like, I did wonder, like, with the wall, because it was the first time I'd ever encountered lighting problems like that, I was wondering if it was related to the window patch they released recently. Like, if it might have been a problem with that, because it was just weird. I was moving the window around and it would, like, flash black and then go, I don't know. But yeah. But speaking of the window mod, that is cool. You can have, like, windows put, like, right next to each other now without having to use move objects on. And there's, like, less clipping issues. There used to be, like, issues where you put them too close together and they'd sort of clip through each other, so one of the windows would be, like, partially closed off and not work properly, like it would be partly a solid colour instead of transparent. So I think that problem's gone now. I have to admit I didn't test it too thoroughly for this build because all the windows I used are fairly spaced out. But yeah, assuming that's changed, that's pretty cool. I do know that you still have to have you can't resize the windows because the hole remains the same size. It's a similar problem to the animation thing where it just stays the same size. So, and that's still there. That hasn't changed. But it would be really awesome if they, I don't know if it's possible, but if they could patch it in so that windows, like, are properly resizable, that would be amazing. Because, like, these windows that I've used on this build, the bigger ones that are, like, arched, they're actually a little too big. They're a lot bigger than they are in RuneScape, and it would have been cool if I could have resized them to the actual size. I just paused my like recording temporarily because there was an ice cream truck going past, and also to like drink something. So I think I was talking about windows, but yeah, sort of lost track of my train of thought there. But yeah, the window patch seems pretty cool because, you know, it was possible, I guess, with move objects to move them fairly close together, but having that work without move objects and also like work properly is pretty cool. So yeah, I spent a lot of time putting all of these rocks on the outside because like there's like a sort of cliff, a rocky cliff sort of thing going around the outside of White Knight's castle in the RuneScape game. I didn't have the rocks come up as high as they are in the game in the end. It's actually quite hard to sort of get them to look like right while they're on top of each other, because like the part under the water you can get it to look fairly decent, but like the stuff on top is more visible, and so it's easier to notice like inorganic ways the rocks are sort of placed. I think a lot of them were created to be tileable, which was very useful. Like the part under the water didn't take too long to sort of do. I just put like one particular rock all the way around it for most of it, and that worked fine. This part, like the part where I was putting the like knight statue on the sort of rocky outcrop, that was difficult because I had very limited amount of space to work with at that point. I don't think it occurred to me like how awkward it would be to try fitting it in, and like the edge of the lot is right next to the knight, so like and it was like it's a very small outcrop. It's not as big as it is in RuneScape. It like comes out quite a way in RuneScape, but there just wasn't room because the lot's too small. I think if I did it again, maybe I could find a way to make it all like shrink down in scale so that it can fit more stuff. Possibly, but this castle, I mean, it isn't too big, so there would only be so much space I could save. I also really like the debug like mossy cliff rocks. They were very useful because there's a kind of a mossy, like there's the effect of like moss stains on the rocks in RuneScape. There also are on some of these other rocks, which was pretty cool and useful. But yeah, like it sort of added a bit more colour and made it more visually interesting. Like instead of just having all of these grey beige rocks, you have some like green patches, and you could sort of move it up and down so that like only some of the moss was showing too, so it's like smaller patches, which I did in certain areas. So yeah, I thought that ended up turning out pretty well. I did tweak with it, like tweak it a lot, the exact placement of the rocks, and yeah, I think if I did it again I would make them come up a bit higher, like similar to the game, but I'm fairly happy with like how the outside turned out. Around the edge, like the roof around the external part, the outside part of the castle, was quite difficult to do. There's lots of like little roof pieces in places, and I ended up editing, like I altered certain parts from the original build because the grid stopped me being able to place stuff in the right place. So there were like certain pillars I didn't bother putting down, and because the pillars that you can buy in build mode, they're quite they always snap to the grid, and other stuff I created wasn't like exactly over the top, and yeah, that just didn't work. So what I ended up doing was getting some of the like brick pillars from the debug mode and adding them instead of like the original pillars, but since they're really not designed for this purpose, that was incredibly like it took a long time to do that, and it did get quite boring because it was very repetitive. Like I had to use like 4 pillars on top of each other for all of the pillars and like if I'd used the in-game one, it would have just been like apply the pillar and then make it as tall as you want over that entire section, but I had to like move them and then put them in exactly the right place, and tried to avoid them clipping through the wall and through the lower bit of the pillar. And I became very, like, obsessive about it too. Like, I'm sure, like, to some extent, if there were, like, some small thing that wasn't quite right, people wouldn't notice, but I ended up, like, fixating on these pillars and stuff. And yeah, that part I didn't enjoy so much, because that did get very repetitive. The courtyard made me really wish that you could use the terrain paint on anything. That would be awesome. At some point I might actually make like a video on the build mode features I'd like in The Sims 4, because I have like so many that I've thought of now in my head, but definitely the terrain paint, right? Because well, as I was like making it, there's several terrain paints that would be like the patchy grass one would have been really great in the courtyard, but all I had to work with were like the carpets, and there are some grass type carpets in the in The Sims 4 that you can use, and there's like, you know, pathway, textured pathways and all of that stuff, but it's all like very, it's applied, like it's the grid again, right? So it all looks a bit kind of like wrong and fake. So to try and get around that, I ended up putting like a bunch of grass and plants and rocks in certain places. It still doesn't look too brilliant in the end, and also like the crates, I tried to position them so that they were covering parts of it, so that way it seems less like it's all being applied according to the grid. But if you could use, since the terrain paints don't follow the grid, and you can just sort of spray them all over the place, that would have been like a lot more realistic looking if I could have done that, but they only work on terrain and not on the ground, or like on the like platforms and stuff. So yeah, it would be cool if they patched that in at some point, so you could do terrain paints anywhere. But I'm assuming, I mean, they are called terrain paints. There's probably a reason why it's set up like that, and why you can't sort of paint them onto just any object. But yeah, I don't know. Well, I wouldn't need them on any object. I just want them to be available so you can put them on like any floor. That would be cool, because like the grass and stuff, it's fine if it's a small patch and then just maybe put some flowers in it. But like when it's all like in squares, it looks very odd. But you'll see what I mean later in the video. And I did sort of mitigate it somewhat by adding grass and stuff in places. The problem with the grass, of course, is that if you look down on it from high up, which you can do because the courtyard's exposed from every level of the castle, a lot of the grass, some of the grass is fine, but some of them you can sort of see the planes, because of course it's just like textured on 2D planes, right? And then they're put close together, and then they have like a little alpha map thing so that they're transparent around the grass texture. It's not like obviously they don't, the grass isn't individually modelled, right? Obviously that would be insane. The processing power required for that is just, it's not practical. So yeah, because of that, like, you can see that if you look down on it. So I had to like liberally use the grass so that it's not like very obvious that there's like a large selection of like fake looking grass, because it always looks better face on, really, that kind of thing, not like when you're looking down on it from above. But I suppose that's more of a problem with like video game artwork generally. Like, you can't really avoid that to some extent if you're putting like grass around in games. Yeah, so what else? This is like a long time. I've been talking for about 36 minutes now, and this video is like an hour and 14 minutes long. I think like a lot of the exterior is done in the video at this point. But yeah, I did most of the interior secondly, but not all of it. So like a lot of the interior stuff I ended up doing after I'd finished all of the exterior. I did put down that double bed and some of the beds so that I could just like quickly test that area. There's like Saradomin. God, I don't really know how to pronounce that. I've heard it said before, but I've forgotten. Well, Saradomin, the god that this castle is like supports. He's actually there now in the game in RuneScape 3 because he comes back after the various plot stuff occurs. Yeah, because for a long time none of the gods were in RuneScape, but then they came back after like a event. I don't know if they're there in old school RuneScape or if they're still all dead. Well, not dead, but gone. Banished, I guess, by Gothics. That's definitely happened in the new RuneScape, like RuneScape 3, but I don't really know the lore of what's happening in the old school RuneScape because it's kind of like following along its own storyline now and has its own updates. It still has updates as well, which is interesting, like completely different stuff is introduced to that game than to RuneScape 3. Yeah, so the throne room. I had to get pretty creative with that because there's no stone chairs or anything in The Sims 4. So I basically just used like some debug stone thing, like a tombstone, I think, and then put like another stone thing on top of it. I've forgotten exactly what I used now, and we haven't reached that part of the video yet, but yeah, it was interesting. There are a bunch of like statues of like knights, stone statues, surrounding the throne as well. There's nothing like that I could use, so what I basically did was put two of the metal statues on either side of the makeshift throne, and then put like two like the top hat busts, like the bust of the guy with the top hat. I put two of them in front of it. It's very different to what it actually looks like, but I just had to kind of make something, and then I used like a white armchair, and it does work because I tested it. Unless I moved it slightly, in which case, because I had to move it exactly right, because it wasn't working initially. Then I changed the chair, it was working, and then I changed the chair, and the new chair wasn't working, so then I had to move it like tiny amounts to like, because it only worked in one specific position. So that's a thought. If you do download this build, the chair, like the throne room chair, really can't be moved at all. Because, like, unless you get rid of the whole thing, because it's in like a very specific position where it can actually work so that you can sit on it. I did think about like making a bunch of knights, like Sims, to include for a video. Technically I still haven't done any, I haven't recorded like a fly through video, or like taken any screenshots or anything like that yet. I've just like built it, and then I'm recording the audio now over the speed build video. That's all I've done so far. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. By the time you're like listening to this, I will have done something. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that because I had a quick look through Create a Sim, and there isn't really anything that clothing wise that really works. There are a bunch of like Star Wars clothes actually. One of them's like a set of white robes. I guess that looks vaguely like it could work. It sort of suits the whole white knight theme, I guess. But yeah, there's no armor or anything. So it's unfortunate because I keep thinking of stuff from like The Sims 2 and Sims 3 that could work. Because you do have suits of armor in that I think came in The Sims 2 Open for Business, and I have all the expansion packs for The Sims 2. So yeah, it's unfortunate that there's nothing like that in the base game for this game, or in Realm of Magic, or the packs I have. But yeah, so I don't know if I'm not going to do that, but I'll just like show images of the build instead, because I thought that would be interesting if there were some appropriate clothes, but since there aren't, I just don't really see that. I mean, there are some clothing that looks vaguely medievalish, I guess, like era appropriate, despite not being like night themed. Because if you go there in the game, there's a lot of activity, and so it's going to be a bit like, reminds me of the video game Spyro, because like when you complete the game, they do a kind of fly-through when the credits are rolling of like various parts of the game, but there's no activity in any of it, and that was always kind of like weirdly surreal, like seeing all of the environments from the game with nothing happening in them. But yeah, there's like a bunch of fighting and stuff going on in the actual RuneScape game in the courtyard. To be fair, I don't think there always was. I can't remember what it would look like before all of the gods came back, but after they did, there's like a bunch of them training in the courtyard, but I don't know if they were there before. And also, presumably like the throne room was empty, but now it's not, because like Saradomin's up there. So yeah. But yeah, Saradomin is like, ironically, probably my least favourite god. Just, yeah. He kind of represents, more generally, I guess, in a very fantasy sense, a kind of archetype I'm not that interested in. I think my favourite was probably Guthix, but he gets killed, which is a huge bummer. I was quite sad about that, to be honest. Although it's nice what they did. Like, he had like a little shrine with butterfly and stuff, and there was a whole bunch of lore they did around his death. Like, you know, they introduced the divination skill, which has like all of Guthix's memories and stuff. Yeah, so that was kind of nice. It's not like they just sort of killed him off and didn't do anything. It had a kind of purpose in the story, and it's also like an appeal to MMOs more generally. Like, you don't want things to stay static, because it kind of defeats the purpose of the genre. Like, the idea of an MMO is that it's a constantly evolving world, because it's online and it can be evolving, unlike other games where they have a sort of story that they've set in advance. They can evolve organically over time. So I don't entirely regret that decision. Like, I thought it was pretty interesting. From a story writing perspective, there was a whole event with Slithgate. I haven't done most of that because I'm still like, I haven't done most of the quests that are associated with it, but I remember like when the event came out, I did some stuff. I think I might have even been part of like one of the battle things. My memory is really hazy, but I think years ago I logged in for a while and then did some of the events leading up to like the gods returning. There are a bunch of them around that. It's very different. Like, if you played this game, I don't know, back in the early 2000s, which a lot of people, you know, a lot of people will have done, because yeah, it's kind of like one of those games that people are nostalgic about, that they played when they were younger. So it's changed a lot since then. At least like RuneScape 3, I think old school is relatively similar in a lot of ways. I haven't played old school because my character moved on to the new one, and I ended up playing the new one because I wanted to keep that character. So I did mean to go back to like old school to check it out at some point, but I haven't. I do really like the updated visuals in the new one, but I have to admit, like, I can't compare them because I haven't played the old school one, but there is a lot about the new one that isn't particularly great, like in terms of their business model, and there are a lot of like microtransaction based events and stuff, and I mean I still like the game because it's like a nostalgic thing for me. Like, I've been playing it quite a while, on and off for like, God, longer than any game, online game. Well, like, I mean, in terms of like internet stuff, it's the site that I've technically been on the longest, probably, that hasn't been removed or just disappeared or deleted. Like, I think I made an account in either 2004 or 2005, so my RuneScape account is really long. Like, you have all these capes that you get after so many years of membership, and I think I have most of the ones that are available, because I have been playing, like, my account has existed for that long. That being said, I still haven't like I haven't got like that high levels. I do have a bunch of 80 level stuff, but I only have 2 level 99s on my account, despite being on it for so long. But I do have large gaps, like where I wouldn't log in at all for years, basically, or I'd just go on for like the Christmas events, because the Christmas events and the holiday events used to be really fun. Like, they were really creative, and there was always like some funny, quirky story to them. Unfortunately now, they tend to just be like skilling events, and they're quite, again, profit oriented, but that's what I was talking about with like the business model thing. They've moved a lot more to like pushing microtransaction based stuff, which does suck. I think it's less of a thing in old school from what I've heard. So they have like, they've given people an option, but it's kind of lame, because I do really like the visuals of the new one, and like, I don't necessarily want to play old school, but yeah, I would prefer it if they didn't focus so much on like the microtransaction stuff. But I think that about a lot of games. It's a problem, you know, in The Sims 4 too, to some extent, with the packs that they have and the gameplay quality in a bunch of them, like this new one in particular, the Star Wars one. I've seen like some videos of people who have early access to it, and there was one video where they mentioned, it might have been Delegracy, I don't remember people's usernames that well, a lot of them, because I don't watch all Sims YouTubers that regularly, but like, I think it was Delegracy. I think she like uploaded a video where she mentioned, God, it could have been anyone though, right? I don't remember, so I probably shouldn't say. Somebody uploaded a video and they had early access to the new pack, and basically they said that none of the lots, there are no lots in the new pack. Like, you can't modify anything, which just really sucks, on top of the like lack of gameplay that I saw from someone else's video where they were showing it off. I am really not impressed with this new pack. And that's the thing, like, I was hoping the build mode options would be interesting. There would be some way of exploring that more, but you can't modify any of the existing lots, which and the thing is, to an extent, all of the new content, all of the new build mode content is going to seem really incongruous in most places and most worlds. So the fact that you can't modify anything in the world that the stuff was created for is a really big problem, because it's all Star Wars build stuff. So it's obviously going to look better in that world, but there are no lots that you can customize. So yeah, I'm doing the throne room now in RuneScape, just to change the conversation. Yeah, so the prayer table that's in the RuneScape, in that part of RuneScape, that was like kind of a pain. I had to do the thing I normally do, where I put a bunch of stuff down and then move the stuff I want to the exact location, and then remove all the stuff. And it's such a hacky way of doing it. It takes quite a while, and I'm sure there's a more efficient way of doing it, but that's always how I try and move stuff in exactly the right place. There were like some wall cabinets too, and I used the display case to recreate that, and there are a bunch of crossbows in them, so since there's like a cupid bow, and you know, I don't know what this bow and arrow, the cupid bow and arrow that's in debug, I have no idea. I don't even know what that's related to in the game. Like, I can't think why that's there. Like, I haven't encountered it in game, whatever it's used for, but it is there, and I used that instead of the crossbows in the cabinets, which was pretty useful actually, because I needed to put something in there. There's also a bunch of swords, and there's a table in the RuneScape build that has swords, so that was cool. But yeah, for the prayer table I just ended up using like one of the career rewards that's like a little star, because there's something similar on the actual table that's gold and like a star or something, I forget. So that actually ended up looking fairly close to the original, but it was the throne that was just like impossible to... I experimented with a lot of stuff. In the end I just decided, well, it's not going to look anything close to the original, so let's just like try and make something cool looking that is a throne. And I was going to put like, because there's like a piece of blue fabric on the stone on the actual throne, I was going to put like a curtain. But again, they've said this so many times now, the grid, right, it forces the curtains and any wall decorations to snap to walls. And there's so many uses I can like think of for a lot of this stuff if it didn't snap to like the nearest wall. So many things that I could have used to create a similar effect if it wasn't for that. But I gave up on that in the end. And then I was like putting crystal geode things onto the guy, like the statue's heads, like on top of their hats, but it never covered the whole hat. So in the end I just sort of abandoned that weird idea. And there are a bunch of like helmets on wooden wall plaques around the Runescape build, so I just replaced those with fish plaques, because there's nothing exactly the same. I mean, later on I did actually create some plaques using a debug tool option, but I didn't really want to go back after that, and I also thought there still isn't anything else that I could really add. I mean, there are some skulls I could probably have put up there, maybe, but I thought the fish like worked well enough. And I resized like a bunch of crates for the armory, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I like paid attention to, like little pillars that are on like the edges of walls and stuff that are like pretty much exactly like in the original, and that like I was quite obsessive about recreating what I could as closely as possible. So a lot of that stuff, like, that took a while and paying very close attention. I think my favourite room, which I haven't built yet, assuming this is in sync, I'm working on like the cannon now, which is what I mentioned before, like I added some wheelbarrows. And yeah, the barrel things. I added 2 of them back to back to give it like the right amount of length, because the barrels are quite short. They're like smaller barrels. And then I just added some stones around, because in the actual cannon section there are like a bunch of cannonballs and stuff lying around on the ground, so I basically just put swords there instead, because it was like something to put there. I did initially, like, I tried to find something that could be a replacement for cannons, but I had like nothing. The only round shapes were like orbs, which just didn't make sense to have lying on the ground, or like onions and stuff, which would have been really random, just have like a bunch of onions in this room. Like, what is this room related to? Yeah, that required too much suspension of disbelief, so I put some like swords there instead. But yeah, I really like the fact that the Cupid arrow and bow and arrow exists, because that was very useful just to sort of put, and also that I could move it using the move objects tree, so that it was in like in the cabinet, and it looks like it's actually in the display case, which is really cool. But yeah, so my favourite room in the build was actually the torture room, because I found like some really cool ways to recreate some of the stuff. Like, there's no manacles, right? And the shelves are no good because they're quite thin, like the bi-mode shelves. You've got like, in the actual RuneScape torture room, you have like manacles that are attached to some like wall plaque kind of thing. Like, there's a solid sort of wall, and then the manacles are like, I mean, there's a solid piece of wood, and then the manacles are hanging down from the wood. So I guess you'll see this at some point later in the video. Should be soon actually, because I'm building that floor at the moment, and I did it like floor by floor in order. That way I wouldn't like get lost and forget certain things, so I could sort of tick it off as I was going. Yeah, so there are no manacles in The Sims 4, so I basically just used the handcuffs and then resized them, because they're actually hanging in the same direction, which is great, because I don't have the tool mods. I mentioned it in another video, and I'm going to look into it again at some point, because I didn't properly before. I think it's like you have to pay for it, which I don't know. Like, I think it's on someone's Patreon. There are a few moments of this video where it goes black, which is kind of awkward. I might have to edit that out. So I'm like watching it now. I didn't notice that because I haven't watched this the whole way through before, but yeah. I don't know why that is. I think it's because I minimized it maybe, and then sometimes it does weird things. I had that in my other builds, like it was really long and then certain parts of the video were like black. Oh god, just completely... Yeah, the torture room. Also, there are like these fences. I had problems with some of them where I would select the black one, the spiked fences, and then it would just randomly turn up green if they were rotated in a certain way. That was odd, but I managed to get it looking okay in the end. So yeah, they worked really well in the torture room, and then I put like a couple of planks so it was the right width, and then and the right height, and then like I attached like the handcuffs. For the like actual table things, obviously I can't recreate the like rack perfectly because I think they're actually torture racks, so what I just did was add like a bunch of like I added a bunch of stuff that could be used as torture devices to the table. It's kind of a bit morbid, like I put a poker on one of the tables and like a bunch of knives and a hammer. It's like, just imagining what this stuff is, because all that stuff is in RuneScape, the stuff that I used. I think all of it. I think I added some pins. I'm not sure if pins are available, but they have other sewing equipment, so yeah, I felt like it was still in universe, even if, and there were bloodstains on the ground, but there is nothing resembling bloodstains that I had available, so I just put a bunch of like compost piles so it looked like there were like dirt and trash around to give it a kind of grungy feel, even though there is no blood stains. But yeah, so the debug objects really helped a lot. This would have been a lot worse if I didn't have access to them, because there was a lot of interesting stuff I could use, like the crossbow and the handcuffs and even like the little black railing fence. The thing about that is I did test a lot of this build, but what I didn't test is whether those railings have collision, because they're debug objects, and I think a lot of debug objects do have collision. Like in my other build I noticed that the pavement slabs do, but I don't know if they do, so that would be interesting if they can just walk straight through it. That would kind of break immersion a bit. But yeah, there's another set of the railings on the ground floor where there's another cage, and there's a bunch of skeletons in the game. I didn't have access to skeletons, but there are some fish skeletons, so I put them in there, and then some of the like skulls that are from the, I guess, Day of the Dead event, some kind of Day of the Dead related celebration thing. There are a bunch of like colourful skulls. It's kind of a bit, it's not exactly as like, you know, it's like a bit weird because there are like, why are there all these fish bones and it's supposed to be human skeletons, and also the colourful skulls, but it's sort of vaguely related to what it would be in the RuneScape game. What I really wanted to do was add a cow plant skeleton, but the cow plant that you can get in debug objects, it just comes in the ground, like planted, not fully grown. And also, I mean, it is fully grown in the catalogue when you place it, but then when it comes in, it like quickly changes to like a soil patch that's like not fully grown yet, so you'd have to wait for it to grow, which I didn't want to do. And then there's no skeleton version of it. And another thing is I'd have to like, well, I have to like get it fully grown and then wait for it to die and like play this lot until I do that, I guess. I suppose you could add it to inventory and then just move the family in and then place it, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. It was a bit too much of a pain, so in the end I just added the fish skeletons instead. But I think it would have been, it's a perfect place to put a cow plant skeleton, I guess, if you download this lot, because it's quite iconic. Like, it's like such a big part of the Sims game, and then the RuneScape game obviously has skeletons, so it's sort of like, yeah, it's kind of a fun thing to do with that, since you don't have Sim skeletons to work with. I mean, it is a teen game, and I guess The Sims is kind of a kind of happy game. That's a bit too morbid for it. Yeah, I used like a lot of like the debug walls and pillars and stuff for certain things, because some of them had like better textures that fit the actual build more, and you can move them wherever you want and not have to snap to grid, because sometimes pillars just wouldn't be placed where I wanted them to, and I was just like, nope, not having this, so I'm just gonna use the debug pillars. I think it looks okay, and you know, they don't look too weird or stand out too much, and so I think it's worked. But I've obviously only briefly playtested it. I haven't played a lot for a long time. I'm hoping it won't be overly laggy, because obviously there's a lot of stuff used here, especially a lot of rocks. It seems fine on my PC, and it takes less time to load than my pool mansion did, which is quite a slow loading lot. But yeah, I guess it depends on your PC specs a bit, because it is a sizable lot. But yeah, so there were no, like, I used the sword and shield wall decoration in a bunch of places, because there are a bunch of like shields on the wall in the original build, so I thought that was like equivalent. And then this table was fun to create. Like, I spent a lot of time looking for like the perfect stuff in the debug options to like add to it. The actual table is a lot bigger and has room for like 6 seats. The only round table that looks remotely like it in the Sims is like a smaller table that only fits 4 people. So what I think I did was add like 4 chairs, and then I think I ended up changing it in the end. So I added like more chairs and like moved them out of the way, because I thought about it, and like the table isn't at all functional anyway because it's full of clutter. So there's really no need to sit at it, because it's not going to be used like as a dining table or anything. So yeah, I just ended up like adding more chairs in and just moving them around. Unlike the table above, which the chairs were also not attached in Runescape. They're all over the place, but I did actually have them be functional there. And then in the kitchen there's a dining table, and I added like the bar stools. I mean, the wooden bar stools that you can make with the crafting table that are like low level and look kind of like very, very amateurish. I added those because they're the closest thing to like little wooden bar stools that are in the game. But bar stools don't work on tables, annoyingly. They only work on counters or bars. So like, I couldn't have them actually function. Well, I'm pretty sure they don't function, but I actually didn't test them. You can sit on them, but they're not attached to the table. So I'm assuming that Sims won't automatically go there and then eat on the table while sitting on the bar stool. But I don't know, they might sit on the seats even though you can't, and not put their food down, which would still serve the same purpose. So I don't know. To be honest, like, with a lot of these builds, with the last one as well, I wasn't thinking too much about having them as livable homes or anything. This could almost be like a community lot, I suppose, but I mean, it couldn't, because I haven't like bought all the stuff you need, and I haven't like, I think they probably need some other stuff, like for parks I think you need a grill or something. I can't remember all the requirements, but you could use them as like little community lot castles that like people visit as well. Yeah, so with the bedroom area, and this is like one of the last rooms I did, so we're coming up to like the end of the video now. I just made like, I just put some shelves down and then added a bunch of like resized like some end tables and stuff and put them all over the place. The weird thing is, I don't know if this has changed in a patch or what, but I remember like I made a garden shed room a while ago, and that was like one of the first, this was like not long after I started playing Sims 4 probably, and it was one of the first thing I used like the move objects cheat with, and I found it really difficult to add stuff in like using move objects, because stuff would keep snapping, and obviously this is a problem with all surfaces and tables, but for some weird reason it was surprisingly easy with these shelves to add stuff wherever I wanted it to. And like, even end tables, which I'm fairly sure you wouldn't have been able to move. I mean, it helped that I resized them. I didn't resize anything when I was doing the garden shed thing, because I didn't know how to do that at the time. But yeah, and I made these bunk beds, which are of course non-functional, because, yeah. But they are bunk beds in the game, and the bottom bunks work, the top bunks don't, so they're just purely cosmetic bunk beds. I think this is the longest I have ever talked in a video, and to be honest, I am like not used to talking for such long lengths of time, so it's kind of hard going, you know, like when you're speaking a lot, it's just like kind of like need to take time to breathe, because I'm speaking pretty quickly too. So yeah, the kitchen, like, it has 2 ranges, and then there are a bunch of like pots and pans and spatulas on the wall. What I ended up doing was I added the debug wood wall decoration thing, because in the game it's like wood with all of the metal stuff hanging down, so I thought that just looked better than having the metal thing that it was attached to, so it looks like all of the stuff is hanging from the piece of wood. I did really miss again, it would have been really useful to rotate stuff for the kitchen, like to have like spatulas and stuff hanging from the wall thing, as well as just the pots and pans, if I wanted it to be like 100% the same as in RuneScape. I could, like, it would have been cool to do that, but they're all like rotated at the wrong angle, so I can't hang them there without it looking completely wrong. So yeah, still like, oh, there's 4 minutes. Like, I did the courtyard pretty much right at the end. I think I also did, like, I added a bunch of plants to the outside, and that was what I did right at the end. But yeah, the courtyard thing, that was a bit of a pain, because as I mentioned, you can't use terrain paints on ground like this. So I just like put some sort of pavement around, and then added the grass carpet texture, and then some of the like the grass flower thing, and then I used like a bunch of compost and ingredients pouches, I think, for like, because in the game there's a pile of sacks by the stairs, so luckily there's like a pile of sacks in debug, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this build that if I had done it without knowing debug, I wouldn't have been able to do like half the stuff that I actually ended up doing. And obviously there's still a lot that's different, because there's still a bunch of like limitations. I added like some wall flowers, like there's some like ivy or something with some little flowers in, which I thought looked really cute and kind of matched the aesthetic. At this point I was like getting really creative. Those wall flowers aren't even in the original build and don't need to be there, but I just kind of wanted to add them. I don't know, maybe I'll like do an original castle at some point, but not soon though, because I'm actually like, this took a really long time to do, like a few days of work, not constantly, but like working on it on and off, and yeah, because I'm kind of slow at building. I definitely would have to take a break before doing anything as big as this again, I think. I say that, I don't know though. I mean, because it's fun doing these builds, right? But they do take a long time. Because it's like, yeah, it's just such a large build. It's more rewarding when you're done and you can look at all of it. It's like, it's cool, but like the process, it takes a while. Yeah, so I added, like, there are a bunch of trees around the outside of the castle and some walls, and in the end this looks pretty different from what it looks like in RuneScape, but like I really had like no space to work with, so I just kind of put stuff like all over the place. As long as it sort of fit the general aesthetic, then I thought that was fine. I added some like blue flowers there, and added some more flowers on that little island at the back. And there's the bench, and that bench and the little bush next to it, or near, I think it's further away in the game, but there's still a bush there. Those are actually there. There is actually genuinely a bench behind the castle. Of course it looks really weird here, because there's also a bunch of shops and stuff behind the castle in the game, but I don't have room for that, so it's not there.
I added the patchy grass texture around some places, and that would have been perfect in the courtyard, but unfortunately, as I said, you can't add it. So I did spend quite a long time tweaking like the grass texture. Seems like not a long time in this video, but it did take like a little while to do that. And then because I kept changing my mind about like the exact thing, and I also kept lowering the terrain because it's not that steep in the game, so I wanted it to be as flat as possible. And added some like vague brick textures around, because in the game it's obviously the path is quite faded. It's not like a solid colour the whole way through, so I wanted to recreate that effect. And this is actually coming to the end of the video now, so I'm assuming this will run over or something because it's bound to be out of sync. But yeah, so you can find this build on the gallery, and I will be making more later. As I said, I'm hoping to do Draenor Manor in the village at some point, but I will need the vampire pack before, because like it definitely requires that. Like, it would be a shame to do it without it, because there's so much cool stuff in that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.